Hi, welcome to this week's edition of Earth Nouveau Hub. Today, we're going to be talking about ancestors. It's a beautiful April here today. And yeah, so welcome everyone. Hi. Great. So Anna Mette had originally proposed this topic to me, talking about our ancestors, like how we're working with them. How are we being guided by them? Are they working against us or with us? And are these our ancestors, our DNA ancestors, or are they the ancestors who are here on the land, on Earth, on Terra, on Gaia? What are your practices for working with ancestors? Do you have a specific ancestor that you're working with? So I'm just going to get started with a little story. My my mom, her dad was a federal court judge, and his dad was a federal court judge. And I was kind of close to her dad, I guess, when he was alive. He lived until he was 90, and he lived with us. So, he was a really fun guy. And I never knew his dad, but his dad has been coming coming up and working with me, which is kind of surprising. I mean, I work with the energy of natural law and universal law. So I guess it makes sense that there's a couple a couple judges, in my ancestry who work with that energy too. But, I've been working with, some special projects on healing some multidimensional, I don't know, sort of like cracks in the matrix where energy is coming through. And just such a surprise that he stepped forward to, help work on this sort of clearing project from higher dimensional realms. So that's been really interesting for me to get to know him a little bit better from, from the other side of things.
Hopefully Roscoe doesn't bark again. Sorry for that, y'all.
All right,
He's
he
so,
just wants to join the conversation.
he does. He likes to participate. Um, I've worked with my ancestors for a long time. Um, I started giving an offering to my ancestors at breakfast. So sometimes I'll do a little bit of whatever I'm cooking for breakfast. But every day I make coffee, right? And so I started making a cup of coffee as an offering to my ancestors. And the first day that I did that, I kind of pushed it over to the corner of the kitchen that I kept that. And I heard my mom's mom, my grandmother, say to me, "Now you know I take my coffee with cream and sugar." I was very close to my grandmother. She's very special to me, and she's so meek that like it wouldn't really have been like her to say that. So it was funny how she was a little bit bolder than she was embodied. But I still do that. That was, I don't know, 3 years ago that I started doing that. And I still do it because it's like a special connection to me and my grandmother and all my ancestors. And I have this curio cabinet in my sunroom uh, that has like books that members of my family have written, my great grandmother's tea set, a gift that my grandmother got me. Like it's kind of where I honor my ancestry and my family lineage, and so like that's where I like to put my cup of coffee now in the morning. Um, I also honor my ancestors anytime I do a fire ceremony. It's very important for me to bring them in, and I look at those not only as being my DNA lineage ancestors, but also the ancestors in the lands that I live on. And whenever I travel, like I always like to ask permission from the ancestors there of the land, to walk the land. And I have some of the most beautiful experiences. I remember being in West Virginia for a Freddie Silva talk, which was lovely. And I woke up that morning and I asked for permission to speak, to from the ancestors to walk the lands. And all of a sudden, they just like showed up like all through the hills of West Virginia. There were like a million of them. And they were just standing there to greet me. And like the energy of it was really amazing. And then I was in the desert at the end of January. And I woke up in the morning and I was in New Mexico. We were headed to Tucson. And I asked for permission to enter the land from the ancestors. And I saw great grandfather Navajo came and like bowed at me. And I had a very brief conversation with him. And it was just, a lovely experience. But we drove north and we headed into Arizona, and we stopped at this gas station to get gas and snacks and stuff like that. And as I was walking into the gas station, I noticed like the person coming out of the door to my right, like having a hard time opening the door. So I just opened the door, and it was great grandfather Navajo embodied, and he was tiny and weak and had a hard time walking. So I just opened the door for him, and he started talking to me in Spanish, and I knew about 40% of what he said, but I just smiled real big. And then I opened the other door for him, and I walked him to his car. And it was just a very special moment to have like seen him in the morning in meditation as I asked for permission to walk the land, and then to like be greeted by him embodied and be of service to him. So it's a few ancestor stories from me. Now, I got a lot of them, but like,
I love that. It's really beautiful. Yeah. Great. Anybody else have any stories they want to share or practices they want to share? I know Marissa had written in the chat that most guidance she's received shares to call on healthy, healed, wise, and willing ancestors. This sort of like brings me to some of my experience with like what's a helpful ancestor and what's an earthbound soul. Like, where is the difference there? And I do a lot of land healing and land clearing, helping to open energy portals. So if someone doesn't want to be an ancestor, they're just trapped on the land somehow, they can go through and to the most appropriate vibrational frequency for them. And whether that's going back to their apex, as a soul shard, going back to their alive and open apex now, or being able to move through to higher dimensional frequency to work from the other side. I found just so many here in San Francisco and everywhere I travel, just earthbound souls that are trapped or bound to the land in some way and don't want to be there. And those aren't the people who want to be ancestors, but when I do that and open that portal and open that prayer, I always ask, do you want to be, do you want to stay here as a land ancestor, or do you want to move to that, most appropriate vibrational frequency? So, I think there's that kind of separation of densities that's happening, that's allowing for those choice points right now.
But I was wondering, like you said, Tanya, it's like it can be the case that is no ancestors, that it can be just like you are in certain area just because you have to do some, connection or message that you're going to receive, or something that you have to do. That's not necessary. That have to be something from our ancestor.
Yeah.
And I don't know, the reason because I was thinking about that is because that's remind Jen talking about the grandfather. It remind me something that happened to me almost like 13 years ago. I think that's 2012, I believe, or 2011. I was looking to fly from DR to Miami. I was living in Miami at that time. And then I couldn't find any flight. Yeah, I had to go to get in Miami the next day early in the morning because I gotta go to work. And then I asked my daughter to find a flight for me because I was accommodated all kind flight, evening early, early, and like 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock, nothing happened. Open to get the flight to Miami. And then I told my daughter to look at it for any alternative. And they pop up one flight. I had to go to Puerto Rico, and from Puerto Rico to Miami. It was like making like a triangle. Any case, but I said, well, that's the only choice, I got it. But when I was in the airplane, just like a half-hour flight from Dominican Republic to Puerto Rico. When I was in the flight, I was asking myself, because at that time I was doing some kind of energy healing. I was going a lot to Mount Shasta, and a few park in San Francisco. I was traveling a lot at that time with one of my friends from Miami. In those crazy chasing for the light at that time. Any case, when I got over there at the airport, I forgot something. I think it was in the checking point, and then I went back. When I went back, I see like they were receiving with music, like a native Indian, native Indian music from Puerto Rico for a team that was coming. They received like there was won a championship. I don't remember what it was now, but it was, it was funny because they were playing like a native music, from Puerto Rico. And when I saw that, and I go, because I'm going to go straight to the checking point to just sit down and relax and wait for my next flight. But when I saw that, I went back and go around. And when the first thing I saw them in front of me was the Puerto Rican store in the airport with everything that had to be native from Puerto Rico. And when I saw that second coincidence, I said, well, I asked again, what am I doing here? And then I had the sensation to get a coffee, and then I went outside, and the double door, I just stepped in, the double sliding glass door open, and automatic when I step 1 feet outside, it started raining. And I asked the question again, what am I doing here? And then I felt the sensation to sit down on one bench that I have in the exit of the door. And there was a guy that was from rental car. He's approached me, then he asked me a few questions, and I just sat down over there and asked the question again. And I closed my eyes, and I saw like it was like people coming from the mountains. They were Indians, right? In with the dress, with the feathers, and then circle around. And the raining was so light, the raining, that you couldn't figure out it was water or what was. It was so shiny. And I just sat there and closed my eyes, and I saw all those beings coming down. And I said, okay. And I just, did my connection, whatever came to my mind at the moment. And later on, somebody told me that they took me to Puerto Rico because I had to ground some energy for the ancestor to come back. I said, that's kind of interesting. I said, why didn't tell me this? So that's why I don't have to go to so much drama, but I know they won't say it, because if somebody tell me that's something, no, you don't, you have to go to Puerto Rico, not to Miami. I won't believe it, right? And that happened to me just to get to Puerto Rico and supposedly to helping to ground some energy for the ancestor to come back to the land. And it was like, now I forgot about that long time ago. And now Jen talking about the grandfather, that memory just dropped in my head. It was like, okay, then in this position, it's like sometimes maybe cannot be ancestor, but maybe we have the agreement to do something in certain time that we don't know because we don't remember, right? That's what I was thinking, try to make sense.
Yeah, I love that. Great. Yeah, it's so interesting the way that like my family, we never had any kind of practice or process for, connecting or speaking with ancestors, right? It's like just not, we're sort of like Protestant people, family from long history that, we just like never had any practice or
Yeah.
process for that. And, or even acknowledgement in a way. But my mom has really gotten into ancestral research and, yeah, found, had to like trace back, through all of these different lines of ancestral lineage back to, she like found ancestors in, who fought at Valley Forge with George Washington.
Oh, wow.
So like she became a daughter of the American Revolution, which is a, group of women who, who basically have ancestry, going back to the American Revolution. So,
Oh, that's
thinking about like all of those people who like she researched, and it's an interesting process because you have to have documentation. And a lot of documentation was through the church, like through the churches, like the church would record births and deaths. And when those records were destroyed in some way, whether they, oftentimes they got burned, then you have to go like a different route, like through a different ancestral lineage to trace that. I just thought it's an interesting process. And if you can't trace it, you can't like claim the title, whatever. I think it's kind of strange, but that's kind of interesting, the process that, she's been really interested in going through that research.
yeah.
Mhm.
But
Learned
it,
that from the
yeah.
Golden Girls.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Jen, I didn't hear that.
There was a whole Golden Girls episode about that. The Daughters of the Confederation, I think it
Oh
was.
yeah.
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 Because usually the women had lots give a lot of support for those men to go to the battlefield. And sometimes women was the one that start protecting, for whatever was happening, that they was not happy with the situation. And they start some movement that nobody hear about it. Yeah. Because the masculine portray that they are the one that defending everything. But most of the time women is the one that start the movement.
Yeah. I found when I was in DC, doing some energy clearing of like the geometry there a number of years ago, realized that the Washington Monument is in the Divine Masculine Center of DC, but in the Divine Feminine Center is the building for Daughters of the American Daughters, Daughters of the Revolution, right?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I'm like, well, at least the women's building is grounded here.
That's so
So
ironic.
yeah, yeah. I thought it's like the true center as opposed to the false or
Yeah.
imbalanced center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's put it here, mask it up a little. That's why people doesn't know that it's a feminine energy.
Mm-hmm. And I think we've got a group of really beautiful women here today. So, Marissa, do you want to share some of the things that you were talking about?
Yeah, sure. Well, good morning, everyone. Hi.
Hi.
I'm actually here sitting in a spot today. Well, I've felt I've heard that the ancestors have been working through me in various forms. So sometimes been in a certain spot and someone said, "Oh, I saw your ancestor right next to you," and their like positioning was same as me. So almost like they're dancing through me in a sense. So I've been saying, "Hey, I want to get to connect with you. I want to get to connect with you." And then an elder indigenous, not from my lineage, but a Quero lineage, all of a sudden showed up and somebody I felt really aligned to, and some practices of welcoming in the ancestors on a daily basis. So it was really cool because I had this inner asking, and basically I feel it's my ancestors that align this elder to come into my life to guide me in a certain way. It's like, hey, you want to connect? Here's a practice. So, and so this is a little diversion on what I shared on the chat, but so I have practiced. So so this ghetto lineage elder, and somebody I like, it was really cool because it's somebody I really felt called to and really aligned to. And so all of a sudden the teachings are coming through here. It's not my ancestors, but I feel it's my ancestors that aligned these teachings to just come into my space that I was able to receive. So I have a woman's altar or Quero lineage, and the four directions represented on there, and the elements, earth, air, water, fire, and an area that represents the ancestors. But particularly for me, it's the Awichas, the ancestors, the female ones, because those are the ones that are stronger for me. Those are the ones that are most healed and wise with their wisdom. Um, so every morning, I light a tea light candle for them. And then I also have some wine that I have in a nice little jar that theoretically I'm supposed to pour, but it's not really conducive to my space to pour or spray as it was guided. So I kind of just tip the bottle over onto my thumb, and I have a crystal on each of the directions, and then I bless each of the directions as I'm acknowledging each of them. So like libations, in other words, not the name that was given in this space, but blessing and acknowledging and requesting their support and their communication with them. So I really like these teachings, but yet then I've heard other teachings. Or so in this, we're guided kind of just to call them in and do that. But then my other self is just like, wait a minute, there should be some disclaimer here, because of like what I've got from other readings or other guidance, and what I've gotten on other guidance has been to just call in or specify that you're calling in the healthy, healed, and wise and willing ancestors that want to be there to do the work and to be there for you, because I have many ancestors and not all of them are healed or wise or in a space to be offering support. So those aren't the ones yet. Under the lineage, there wasn't that disclaimer, or I call it a disclaimer. I put that word on it. There isn't that specification, only this. Yeah, I feel it's important to have that baseline of this is what I'm calling in, not the whole wide everything, because everything's a lot. And so I want to tap into that. Yeah, I realized just per a Magna session I got that something was in my cellular body from an ancestor of mine from my dad's lineage of a certain time when he was going through some trauma and some hardship, that's something that's in had been inhibiting me because of his trauma, that I somehow received that. And so a belief he had, I had. So I noticed the need for discernment on what's calling in, and also an opportunity to clear away. And just going back a little bit to the other, to the teachings on the women's altar, there's also the guidance to give continuity to that which has been started by the ancestors, and that not they don't refer to it as they're not saying karma, what they're referring to is the connection with the cosmos, connection with Earth, walking in a prayerful way, caring for your family, having an altar space in your home, in your kitchen, to make that a prayerful way of doing it. Yet I feel also, since it's almost not spoken or not put in there, sometimes you could accidentally open up a can of whoop ass of the other if it's not also said, like almost like if I don't put my intention of I'm calling in these aspects, if I just open up to everything, it's like, hey, watch out there. There's yeah, I would like a little bit more clarity on that, or feedback, Um, yeah. And thank you for listening.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for sharing. I think, like I was saying, for me, it's a newer, like a newer practice, calling for help with ancestors. And what I say is, for my greatest good, Gaia's greatest good, and the greatest good of all. So with that disclaimer, inviting help, but only if it's for my greatest good. Right. And sometimes that can be, sometimes it can be perceived as helpful, and sometimes it can be perceived as not helpful. I had a situation earlier in the year where I had this sort of like allergy attack, and it came up that one of my ancestors was being attacked, like through time space, through time space, gone back in time, that one of my ancestors was being energetically poisoned, that caused this sort of allergy attack for me. So I've gotten to know her a lot better. She's an alchemist. She works with all kinds of herbs and, healing. And so that's been, interesting to bring forth more of those traits from, through the maternal ancestral lineage. Yeah. But I mean, I think that there are, of course, many, many established practices that people have been doing for years and years. But I think working with practices that work for us in what we're doing now, right? It's like, okay, we can look at 20 different practices that people have done in the past, and take what works, take a little bit of that and a little bit of that, and what works for you. So Marissa, thanks for sharing about your altar and the way that you're, blessing and calling for that help and setting those intentions. And yeah, and Jen too, like pouring the cup of coffee every day. I love that. Like that's making it your own, making those practices your own, making them work for you. No, go ahead.
Adding into what y'all are saying, like when I do speak to honor my ancestors, I do, say the ones that are in non-competition, non-hierarchical order with me, the ones that really do want to work with me and support me. And I find that as I'm doing my internal work and my healing work for myself, like I can see the ripples of that. I can see that as I heal myself, I heal like my ancestors before me, but I also see that project forward too. I can see it in my current family too, because I can see them lighten and them adjust as I work toward healing things that like run in our lineage. So I like what Marissa said. If you aren't, well, and you too, Tanya, if you're bringing in ancestors that aren't here to work with you, that it can not fully support your intentions for that. And so, qualifying that, not every spirit, every ancestor is on the path that we're on, and that's fine. That everybody has an opportunity to have their own experience, but we get to decide who we want to play with and who we don't.
Yeah, we get to decide.
Oh.
We get to decide who we play with.
But you know that I was remember about Andrew said that we are our ancestor, our past and present and future. And you know, for some reason I have been kind away from be working with ancestor because there was so much drama from both of my side, from the mother and the father side. And I remember one time I was doing a lot of work in healing that, and some people guide me to do the healing, and then they told me that you have like a whole team waiting for you to sit down and just allow them to helping you. It was like for healing so much pain that happened, you know, because Dominican Republic, it was, you know, was the first island when Columbus do the settlements, and from there it was, you know, that they spread out. There was a lot of violence, a lot to the native Indian. There's no a native Indian there anymore, just maybe, who knows, nothing left, because everything was, they were terminated, because, you know, those race, they don't used to do like a heavy jaw, you know, it was like a lily land, a paradise that they used to live. And when the Espanol came, they were forced to work and to, you know, to mining the gold. And then after they finished with the Indian, they brought the African. It was so much pain in that island because, you know, the seed that was planted there, it was through a lot of suffering and a lot of abuse. And then what the lady told me that was helping me at that time, I said, you just had to sit down because you had a whole team waiting for you to work with you. And the funny thing it was because it was interesting, because the day that I had the energy to sit down and relax to do that, it was like about 3 o'clock in the morning. I was in a process like 3 months, waking up exactly at 3 o'clock, 3:03 or 3:06. And then when I wake up that morning and I sat to, you know, to get up and do whatever I have to do. But I didn't do anything. It was the same day that in my country they were celebrating the Virgin of Mercy. And it caught my attention because after I finished doing the process, that I was talking with my mother about 8 o'clock in the morning. She said today is some Virgin, or they celebrate the Virgin of Mercy today in the, you know, the Catholic Church. Because my mother, my grandmother, they all the same history for 4 generations with a Catholic. And the funny thing, I didn't do any. The only thing I saw, it was like a river of blood, running water. Instead to be water, was running blood. And then whatever I was guiding to do, you know, in my subconscious mind, it was like a so much bringing that neutral feeling, peace, love, compassion. It was like no looking for who was guilty, who did that, who was wrong, who was bad, who was good. It was so, this stage is very hard to express, because I guess I had in my knowing and my doing that I have to do something, maybe because maybe I was part of those people that kill many people there in that time. Who knows? You know, because I cannot present myself like a somebody, a good person. Any case, but the thing was that I was so neutral that I don't have feeling, I don't have pain, I don't have guiltiness, I don't have sorrow. I was just in this full of love or compassion. And the thing that amazed me to that is because it was the day that they were celebrating the mercy. And then I saw when my group of my father family side and from my mother's side, they came together, like when you gather together in one place, and they all of them came interacting and saying hello and shaking hands. And it was like, wow, it was like a healing of pain at that moment. However, it was something that I didn't know, you know. And then later on, I analyzed it myself, and you go back to thinking about the thing that happened. It makes sense because it was a country that was built on the ground was a lot of suffering and a lot of abuse, a lot of criminal, you know. And because the people that came with Columbus in the first tree was people that were in the jail. People that doesn't care, they just want to make a big money and get gold and all that stuff. There was a lot of suffering in the island. And the only thing I saw was the blood running in a river. And then at the same time, the connection gathering between my two sides, my mother's side, my father's side, came together. But it's like you said, if I calling my ancestor, who ancestor I'm calling? It's like you said, and you say we in peace, in love, with no competition, you know, in compassion, whatever I can say, because I don't know who is banging there trying for me to do the job for that person that have maybe 5,000 years running around trying to accomplish something that they couldn't do when they were alive. You know, it's kind of little, from my point of view, for me, it's kind of little scary to go there because I don't know what I'm stepping in, you know.
Like an agenda that's not your agenda.
Exactly. And then I won't be able to discerning. That's my feeling, my point of view. You know, I never know what can coming in.
Sure. Great. Thanks for sharing that. So interesting how much trauma is, you know, the land remembers. The land remembers, and the spirits of the land remember too. Anamete, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little shitty today. I'm exhausted. I'm on a camping site, and the only way I could get internet is by going into the bar, and it stinks smoke and everything, but I'll survive. But I don't know what to say about my ancestors, because I feel kind of angry at them, because I feel the fact that I am living in France, I feel like excluded. I wonder whether there's some kind of energy that doesn't want me in Denmark. It is really weird. And then I have been thinking about also okay, we genetically, we have ancestors. I agree with that. But those are already perhaps incarnate elsewhere. And so they will be living another life today. And how are we affected by that? I mean, before I always saw like the ancestors, and then I got back in time, but they are elsewhere now. Like, and then I am also asking myself about our spiritual heritage, like the path we had taken, all the aspects we have. How do they fit in with the ancestors? I don't have any answers. It's just questions that I've had for years.
Yeah.
So I would like to know what, if somebody has something nice to say about that I haven't seen, or.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I hear what you're saying about the ancestors who are now in our lineage genetically, but now incarnated in a different time space, right? It could be a different timeline. It could be now. They could be, you know, living where they were born originally, or doing something totally different, incarnated into a different race. My mom had a dream one time after her dad died, like, I don't know, 10 years later or something. And he came to her and he said, "I'm autistic now." So maybe he incarnated as, you know, a young person who with autism. And she said, that was a really strange dream. But he, you know, the fact he came to her and just told her that, the hit that I got was, that's the truth, you know, that was true. That was true. He did incarnate as someone who with autism, so he could maybe understand what was going on there. And you know, and when I communicate like with the ancestors, he doesn't seem stepped forward, right? He seems stepped back in a way when I'm connecting. Like, he'll show up and sometimes say something, funny. And he was a really good golfer. So anytime I'm golfing and I'm putting, I say a little prayer for him to help me out because he was so good. And he always does. He always does. So I think their energy is there, right? Whether they're incarnated elsewhere at the moment, their energy is still with us somehow. I'm not exactly sure like how to describe that, but I feel that connection, right? Although when I look at it, it seems like he's stepped farther back than some of the others who are stepped farther forward. I had a really interesting experience yesterday with someone I was working with. She was talking about entities being attached to the maternal ancestral lineage and having worked with a shaman to help clear some of that. And when I work on people, I see the DNA lineage, like I can go back and I can track, oh wait, this ancestor's not crossed over, and this one, didn't have a good life and is, throwing shade down the ancestral lineage. And when I looked at her maternal ancestral lineage, I saw the shaman had sort of like put a ring around it so that the energy couldn't come down through. And that seemed like it wasn't supposed to be there. But as I tracked back through the ancestry, what I saw that she had contributed to the energy attachments that were happening in her maternal ancestral lineage. As in a past lifetime, she was incarnated in that ancestral lineage and was doing some, misusing power, doing some blood ritual that caused then an open energy attachment to come in and then down through the maternal ancestral lineage. Right. And so, I mean, she probably found me because she needed to resolve that lifetime and forgive herself probably for misusing power. But I find that so interesting that a lot of the things that we blame on our ancestors, we were actually the perpetrator in some way, shape, or form, as we bunny hop through our ancestral lineage. So going through and like being able to identify and remember, like, oh, where was I incarnated in that lineage? Who was I?
When I find that working with people that had a lot of trauma in childhood, that they call in an entity to help them survive that trauma, right? And it's not the
I've
first
had that.
that they've done that. They've done that in multiple lifetimes. And in fact, like that trauma itself perpetuates in the lineage until somebody does stop it and clear it, right? And so I've found it interesting how you said that, Tanya, because it's not just necessarily a past life. I see that a lot in this lifetime, and that's like a repetitive pattern that in order for them to shield themselves from what they have to survive in this lifetime as a child, that they'll call in an entity to absorb it for them, and they create a contract to give them energy and suffering in exchange for helping them survive what they went through in childhood. And so like I see more of those coming to me now than I have in the last 5 years. And I think that it's just, we're in that time period now where people need to relieve themselves of that for them to move forward.
Yeah, definitely. I find, that there's a real, I don't know, sort of like read somewhere or heard somewhere. Maybe I was talking to someone years and years and years ago. It's sort of become, this visual that I have and work with, that there's an in-breath and an out-breath of God, right? When God breathes out, things split, 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 create, create, create. When God breathes in, they integrate, reintegrate, come back to center. And so this like soul shard reintegration and all of this sort of like coming back to center that's going on right now, with people's soul shards and with, you know, ancestors and everyone sort of like finding their direct trajectory, right? And reintegrating, like the soul shards reintegrating into our heart center, and whether they be from our ancestry or different lifetimes, right? Or, you know, it seems like everything is sort of finding its proper place now as we are moving into this higher frequency rising timeline. And, you know, there's this timeline split, a falling timeline and a rising timeline. But it seems to me that there's a lot of that integration, that in-breath, that drawing back to God's heart center. Yeah.
I have found it very difficult to choose lately. I mean, I'm on the road and I have constant choices to make. Where do I go next? So I can't just sit like I don't go nowhere, because sometimes I have to get out. And I felt like before there was like one canvas, like, should I go here, there? Now it's like I have this floor, then I have this floor, and I have this floor. So what floor do I put myself on? And when I do a choice, some of those from down here aspects are like, no, I don't have choice. For me, it has been a nightmare this week. Like really, like, ooh. I feel everything mixes up, and it's so difficult for me to have clarity, because I feel there are so many floors in my building. And I don't do steering anymore, like on what floor. It has been really confusing for me this week.
I tend to like to have choices, and I don't think there's really necessarily a wrong choice. I think it gives you an opportunity. Like I keep finding where I have these choices and I pick one and I write it to that timeline, and I know when it's time to go on with that, because I end up exactly not back where I started before, but at that same like divergence where now I can pick the other alternate and carry it forward. And I think, to me, when I look at that, I'm coming back to my highest timeline. Like I've done karmic resolution, or I've completed some contracts that I needed to, and then I go on. So I don't think that there's necessarily a bad choice. It's just a matter of which.
No, it's just that I don't have one voice that chooses. I feel like I'm 10 persons this week. That's what's problematic. They all want to choose something.
Yeah.
It's really weird. I feel like, whoa, really? But like, yeah, that's just my life right now.
You different time, different line.
Yeah. But once I meditated on going back to Denmark, and I really felt like there were 3 nights saying nope. And I don't know what they were about. I don't know if they're still there. I sometimes wonder if certain people in my lineage have been like excluded, because I can see I have one female cousin and one male cousin, and they all like black sheep like me. They're all weird in a way, and they have been kind of like, I won't say excluded, but have been kicked out of the country at several times to go elsewhere. It's really weird. So.
Sandrine, you've had your hand up for a little while. Thanks,
Yeah, I was actually going to pick up on what you just mentioned with the harmonization that is going on, because I have recently been listening to a lot of, well, you know, the astrologer Philip Lindsay. Martina has posted several of his things, and then I started looking into it, and he has a course out that is called like The Mysteries Unveiled. And I just listened to what he's talking about, and it's esoterical astrology. And it's something a little bit out of my league, you know, because I'm not an astrologer. But funnily enough, when you just were talking about the whole thing about the harmonization, is exactly what is currently going on, because we are in the Mercury. So Mercury is direct with, no, the Mercury is in Aries currently. And that is going to be until 2026. Which means that Mercury, who is also the messenger of the god, who is Hermes, you know. And yesterday I was reading in my book about the the Greek deities, and it was the chapter about Hermes, you know, so synchronicity coming along here just nicely. So and Hermes is Mercury. He is the harmonizer in a sense. He's not only the messenger, he's the harmonizer. He's also the leader, and he's, you know, he's bringing you to something. Either he's bringing you to luck, or he's bringing you to your defeat. It depends on, you know, where you're supposed to be going. But what you were stating here with the harmonization, that's exactly what is currently going on. Before we can, and Philip Lindsay talks about this before we can move into the next sub race, or, you know, we are in this 5th or the 6th sub race or whatever. So that is where you lose me. But as soon as we go more into these things that I can grasp on, that was very interesting. And I will. It is also very interesting looking at me being, you know, being born in the Aries, in the sign of the Aries, and I'm actually probably a double Aries. And I have always felt that I'm this mediator. You know, I always tend to, I say that I'm either the enabler or that I'm helping, trying to harmonize things out, you know, but looking at it from both sides. And this is exactly what also and being of service, right? This is exactly what Mercury or Hermes is actually doing, you know, that is deity. And this is what I'm being ruled by, in a sense, you know, from the Aries aspect. It's very interesting that I'm, you know, I'm now putting all these puzzle pieces together. I have never had a direct contact with my ancestors, but as I mentioned before we started recording, I do feel that all the places that I'm visiting and that I'm being drawn to by whatever it is, I sense that I have probably been there before, or that at least, you know, some of my ancestors has lived there, or some things that have. Am I being drawn there to leave something? Am I being drawn there to reconnect with something? I cannot say, probably. But to the fact, what Annemette also said about Denmark and going back home, I mean, for me, coming back home here to Luxembourg, I always knew that my roots are very strong here. And this is probably, and I honestly admit, it probably goes back to Stone Age. There is a connection there that I feel that is very, very strong. It hasn't been manifested for me, but I'm just very drawn to this. I'm drawn to the caves. I'm drawn to the Stone Age. I'm drawn to this, you know, the whole aspect of this, you know, when civilization was probably, you know, came about. And I feel it very strongly when I'm back home here. Every time that I've been out and I'm come back, the energy of this land is just recharging me. And it's not, you know, it's not for nothing that I know now that I had to come back to actually to heal here and not in a different place, right? That I have to go through my, you know, my ailment here and heal here with the energies that surround me. Because I'm actually sitting just 20 meters away from the old Roman road that went through to Germany. And there is probably, you know, the whole, okay, my dad is a hunter and he uses these infrared cameras to record, you know, wildlife. But he also has some that is just like, it's barking, you know, so to repel, you know, it's like it's a voice repellent, it's a sound repellent thing. And he uses it now in the garden to actually repel the cats, you know, from going into the garden bed to dig out the lettuce. But actually it is barking the whole night. But there is nothing, because the other night I was like, why is this whole thing barking the whole time? And I was looking at it. And I was looking at it from my window. There is nothing. There is no wind. There is no bird, you know, there is nothing. I honestly think it's just the souls that are still walking, you know, the path of this Roman road all the time, because it's directly, you know, it's sitting there, and there is nothing else. Why does it start barking, you know? It's like, there must be something. My dad is like, well, there is something. I said, no, there is nothing, you know. But now that I'm just thinking of it, I'm like, it must be them then, you know.
Soldiers,
Still leaving an
soldiers
imprint, you know. Still leaving,
walking.
because it's movement activated, you know. This is just like, it's like, yeah, okay, fantastic. So I unfortunately have never had a direct connection with my ancestors. But yeah, I know that there is a lot going on in the back, you know. But maybe in one of my deja vus, it probably happened. But I'm not. Maybe that is not a portal that I'm, you know, a portal in me that I'm sensible to. But to energies, I am absolutely that I know.
Interesting that you talk about the souls walking down the Roman road. That's one timeline where there's a lot of vows and agreements that soldiers made to the Roman Empire, that people made to the Roman
That people
Empire
made, yeah.
as you know, as being a part of it. Like they were forced to you know, join up and pay the taxes and get into that energy harvesting system or be killed. Right? I mean, what kind of choice is that? The
But they
devil or
also
the deep blue
received bread,
sea, right?
you know. But they also received, you know, bread instead, in a sense, you know. There was a giving as well. There was a lot of taking. I agree on that, but there was also a giving.
Yeah.
Which is why, you know, the Roman Empire became the Roman Empire. This
Indeed.
vast empire.
Yeah, I
Can
find
Can I
that.
say something, Tanya?
Yeah, Lana, go
before we
ahead.
move on? What you were saying there, Sandrine, I was watching something recently, or listening, I should say. And what I'm being reminded of as you were talking is that about the camera, the sound that's coming out of the camera keeps barking all the time, even though there's nothing there to bark at. What I'm connecting it to is there's a time loop that it's going through, and ancestors are stuck in this time loop. And so they go around and around and around, can never get out. So like how you're talking about the Roman soldiers there marching, they're like stuck in this same time loop, and they can't seem to find a way out of it, or they don't know how to get out, or can't think that there is a way to get out. It's just there going around and around, just like what you're doing with your arm there right now. So yeah, that's what came up. Say again.
I'm actually very connected to the ancestors. I'm just spinning. I'm literally spinning yarn. Okay, so now I'm just winding it up. What I was doing. Lana, no, there must be. You know, it's just that I reconnected now with that we were talking about the ancestor, that I've connected this fact, you know, about the barking thing outside. I do, however, not sense any bad, or there is no sizzling energy in that sense that is coming from that part of the road. It's more like they are still, you know, there's still people traveling. They are still going from A to Z, you know, from A to B, wherever they are on.
They're going
that's my feeling that I have. You know, it's still continuation. It's like a long flow of, you know.
It's like a retrograde step, you know. They're going around, coming back, going again, and there is no, like,
for me,
they don't see a way out.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
Groundhog
Day. It's more like a flow. Yeah. We'll see.
I find that when there's spirits stuck in like a timeline, time loop like that, sometimes it almost, to me, energetically, it looks almost like a pea pod, and it just needs to be unzipped and opened, and then they can go on their merry way.
I had a friend when I lived in Pittsburgh. that their house was part of the Underground Railroad, and like I could feel the spirit still walking through the tunnels under the house anytime that I was over there. And I wasn't of an age. I mean, I was in fifth, sixth, and seventh grade, so I was not of an age to know what to do with any of that. But that brings me back to that house now. Like as you're talking, I find myself sitting back in the downstairs of that house, feeling those spirits continuing on their way, right? Like they're in Groundhog Day until they figure out where they're going.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I think I've successfully, like open energy portals and called in, different ascended masters to help direct the souls who are trapped in those scenarios where Archangel Zachary, who is like the higher avatar of Yeshua, Sananda, he works like the shepherd. And so he's like, okay, you go over here. This is where you're supposed to be here. You go over here. This is where you're supposed to be. So opening a portal like that and calling on, some of those ascended masters and the helpful ancestors who, help people find their way. They work like, signposts, sort of like the director, cruise director on the Lido deck. Go ahead. You're supposed to be in this timeline, going back to this soul shard and not stuck in this loop anymore. And that, that goes back to all of these pieces coming back, right? That reintegration. When I was in Egypt, we were traveling, went to Darshur, which is one of the pyramids along this sort of line that's south of Giza. And we went to Saqqara the same day, so they're sort of closer together. And we started going down into this pyramid, and I was like, nope, not doing it. So Melanie went all the way down. Lainey was ahead of me. She went about a quarter. I went about a half. And I'm like, no, it doesn't feel right for me to go in here. So I went out and I walked around. And what I saw when I walked around was that this pyramid was built at a different angle, and that Snefru, who is supposedly the pharaoh who commissioned this pyramid for himself as a tomb or whatever, his architect, he didn't do it right. And so he worked with dark magic, this pharaoh, and he had cursed all of the people who worked on this pyramid to be in this sort of like time loop, one of these same time loops. And so as I was seeing that, I just saw all of these souls in agony, stuck in this time loop again and again, like stuck in that time. So opened a portal, and what showed up, it's always amusing to me what actually transpires when this work is done, was almost like, the metal detectors you walk through at the airport. And all of these souls started walking through this gateway and then just turning into light, walking through and turning into light and walking through and turning into light. And there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them that walked through this gateway. And one of the gentlemen that we were traveling with, there was a soul shard of his that was trapped in that timeline. And I saw as that soul shard went back to him, it was just so fascinating, to see these earthbound spirits who had just been stuck in that time loop be able to, cross over, transition, go where they needed to go, and just turn into light, instead of agonized earthbound souls. So sad. There's so many, Yeah, Marissa.
So, some months back, almost about a year ago, not quite, I had in my awareness some of my lineage. So I have various lineages, but the dominant ones being Mexica and Spaniard. Yet Spaniard is not something I like to fully acknowledge or recognize, per me feeling more resonance with my Mexica side, and that being more of my energetic roots and earth loving. Um, Yet for some time I've recognized, let's say, I'm both the raped and the pillaged and the raper. Not me myself, but my ancestry. So it's almost like, and then even with my mother and father, one of them being dark skinned and one of them being light skinned, and just like one representing more of the indigenous and the other one representing more of the Spaniard. So Spaniard is not something I've really wanted to fully acknowledge, and call in. Yeah, per a family member who's been going through their healing process through childhood sexual abuse. They're an adult now, but it having come up some years ago and it being in their field, uh, with another cousin who has awareness of family drama, and things that have happened in our lifetime. Uh, we've discovered there's been a bit of childhood abuse that has gone on within the lineage, and it's just like, wow. Yeah. I was in ceremony once with medicine, plant medicine, and I guess it's a bit of the energy of what we put our attention on looks back at you. And so I was in that field of being connected to all of that. And then in some levels, like we say, there are ancestors, but yet almost like even shadow aspects, as much as we don't want to acknowledge it, there's no separation if we are aware of it, like an aspect of us in another timeline or something was that, so in that ceremony space when I was in being supported by the fire and by the plant medicine, it was like a space to acknowledge their transgressions. And okay, and then it was almost like, now what? Okay, you acknowledge it. And so it was like a deep purge of releasing the shit, of like an aspect of me, even if it's just my lineage, was the attacker, the harvester, or sometimes it was just the yes sir, to whoever was up there, because I gotta live and I gotta survive, so I gotta follow suit to order, well, not me myself, but they had to follow suit to their commander, and in order for them to stay alive they had to do their thing. So it leads you to kind of sometimes these times and what some things are transpiring. So but in that space it was acknowledging their transgressions, and okay, since I was there and then recognize that's within my lineage, I felt okay, I'm here. It's not necessarily something I call consciously called in. I did not consciously call it in. I didn't invite this in. Yeah, I was looking at these things, so I put my attention on it, so kind of what looks back at you. So I had the opportunity to ask for forgiveness on their behalf, and lay down some cedar as a symbology of forgiveness to the fire. So an act of a ritual as a way of releasing that which once was, almost like, okay, let me ask for forgiveness for you, um, and lay that down and release those aspects so that like you could move on and let that go. Like sometimes one may accidentally follow suit to the person above to be right, as whereas in Mexica lineage, a lot of the prayerful ways have kind of gone down under wraps, because if you were practicing rituals and prayers, then you would be killed. So then a lot of the practices that once were put under wraps, or almost you couldn't practice, and then hence a lot of my current family lineage is in Catholicism, because they had to. If they didn't, then they would have maybe not lived, right? So just the acknowledgement of all this, but recognizing the duality. And sometimes I go, oh, it's ancestors, and I don't want to call in the others. Yet sometimes when we think of, like, say, okay, there's ancestors and this is me and I'm in this skin suit, but sometimes I also recognize I'm all of it. And when I recognize I'm all of it, like that shadow aspect, sometimes I gotta heal that, even though I don't really want to. I don't really feel it's mine to do. Yet, if I'm aware of it and it's up for me, sometimes there's those opportunities to offer healing in those respects as best we can.
Yeah. Well, and that sort of goes back to what you know, what you were saying in the Earth Nouveau dialogue, right? Don't pass on your karma to me. That's yours, not mine. So that inherited karma in the ancestral lineage, like, how do you come to terms with it? And I mean, it has to be forgiveness, I think, in some shape or form. And also saying, okay, yes, I don't have to be beholden to this behavior. I don't have to follow the suit that you followed. You know, I don't have to be a part of that tradition, right? Of domination and control. I'm opting out. Bye. No, if you don't like it, get the heck out, cross over, right? Cross over and do something, but you're not going to be messing here in my ancestral lineage and affecting me in that way. Martina, this is a note from Martina. I've been thinking, what is our responsibility towards our past and future ancestors, or even soul shards? There seems to be such a pull from them at the moment, and everyone wants to be here right now for this grand unveiling. So how does the sovereignty rule apply to this? So as we talk about choice, right? Being sovereign in your own skin suit, standing strongly in your own personal power, and knowing, you know, what your path is, or what your, you know, purpose, right, is, because paths can be very circuitous, like Jen and Anamete were talking about, right, where one layer the path goes this way and you go in a circle and you end up back in the same spot, and then you choose the next one. So I don't know. I mean, I think for me, sovereignty is about alignment and awareness.
When I would balance the sovereignty also with taking personal responsibility, right? Because it's both. And when I do start to feel myself divided, instead of operating as one apex, right? You know, that comes back to getting grounded and holding in my sovereignty and remembering that I'm the one having this experience and I'm the one driving the ship. And then I take personal responsibility for what is mine to heal, and seeing too that when I do heal myself, it does help others, right? But it's taking personal responsibility of what's mine. And you have to use your discernment for what is yours and what isn't yours. Because sometimes when you work to heal something that isn't yours, then you can say that you've taken on their karma, but you've also taken away the ability for them to heal their own karma, right? And so there's an imbalance of energy in that. And as I look at how it feels for everybody wanting to be here to see this now, I am an opportunity for my ancestors to witness what's happening here now through my eyes and through my experience, but I hold myself like as only myself, that they can see it through me, but I don't allow them to I don't allow anybody else in my vessel, right? I don't allow anybody else to live my life or make my choices for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think it's a great thing to acknowledge, like our witnesses, the being standing strongly behind us, supporting us, right? And witnessing what's going on. Think about like my niece just had a baby, who was named after her great 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 grandmother. And Stella, her name's Stella. Stella was from Montana and traveled on a stagecoach to go to college. Traveled on a stagecoach to get to the train, then to go to school. And it was very unusual for a woman to be able to go to college in those days. And at the end of her life, she was flying on an airplane. And to see all of the changes, Jen, when you were talking about that, like the witnesses in your ancestral lineage, I just heard like laughter from back here. Like, you all live in a crazy world. And there's so much change, think about all the changes that are just, natural to us. I mean, when I was a kid, we didn't have cell phones. We had telephones that hung on the wall. And if you wanted to talk to your friend, you had to, or, get the longest cord you could find to maybe like hide in the bathroom to have a conversation, a private conversation, away from the family.
Or
But
stand in the
now,
very, very cold, or stand in the very, very cold hallway, because
Yeah.
the phone was hanging outside in the hallway, and the only room that was heated was the living room, and the kitchen, because there was still the wood fire going on, in the oven, but it was still with wood. And then you were like, you had like 5 minutes conversation because it was too cold.
yeah. And now we're walking around with personal, phones and computers, like in our pockets. I mean, that is just a different way of thinking, a different way of being. And it can be very shocking to those generations that came many generations before us. Yeah. Yeah. And it is a great reminder of discernment to be aware, right, of what's yours and what's not yours. What's your circus, what's your monkeys, and send the rest of the monkeys back to the people who they belong, to whom they belong.
But by all the things of nostalgia, let's not forget that even though we live in very disharmonious times still, in certain areas on this planet. But at least, nobody is going to, okay, we are just women in this currently, but if we would have been men, I could tell you, well, what you just said to me, I take that as an offense. So tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock at dawn, I want to have a duel with you, and I'm going to shoot you down because you offended me. So these are things all like, we're going to burn her and see if she's actually in. So if she's burning, then she doesn't die, then, God's will has been there. But and all this, all the cruelty and this people fighting with each other for with the neighbors or whoever, this is something that has been diminished in a sense, right? So we're living in less violent times, although they are still violent, but at a different scale, at a different level.
Yeah, a different perspective.
Yeah, humanity's always been crazy, right? And
Well,
I'll go in a basket when we get in a skin suit. I don't know what to say.
yeah, we go crazy.
Yeah, we do.
We have emotions and all that kind of stuff, and hormones. Yeah, it's interesting. It feels like, to your point, Sandrine, I can see it was almost like easier to justify violence. But I mean, looking at you know, just the percentage of people who are actually awake on the planet, which I think is a very low percentage, that it seems like, you know, the rest of the people are still like up in arms over certain things, right? Whether they're arguing like Democrats versus Republicans, or Palestinians versus Israeli, or Ukrainian versus Russian, right? There's always something to fight about, but there's always something also to find common ground about, right? And as celestial mediums of peace, all of us, I think we choose to find that common ground and hold the space for love and compassion and understanding. And sometimes that means taking a very neutral stance and disconnecting from the chaos, right? Yeah.
I really like the exercise that I'm in right now of going back through Kuji-yin principles, because you know, I learned it in a class a few years ago, and I've completed the practice, and I've actually done it, like I've gone back through it a couple times. But now that I'm doing it, trying to be able to relay it, I'm looking at it at a different level, and I see how all those blocks build together, right? And so, like, you have Ren at the root, that is that blind faith in the universe and life to take care of us. And then, yeah, the next one is Kyo at your navel, or at your yes, at your navel, for taking personal responsibility. And then there's To at your Dantian for finding harmony and finding that peace within the chaos around you. And then as we go up to like the solar plexus at Shaw, then it becomes understanding that you create everything outside of you. And I love the foundation, like the building blocks of putting all that together. It's all things that I already knew, but seeing it in a different light, that really like cements it for me, and cements also like my confidence in how I have control over my hologram and how I can make it whatever I want. And I don't really have to fear making a mistake or making the wrong choice. All I have to do is bring myself back to center and like start over again, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love bringing all those very simple principles together, and you know, building this totem, I guess, of concreting my sovereignty and my ability to do what it is that I want to do in my hologram.
Beautiful.
Well, you know, Jen, that I taken the class with you now. I feel like more in control of myself, not to see, waiting to see what happens. It's like when you are driving the car, instead we sit down in the back seat, something like that, the sensation. And I was wondering, because when Tanya, you mentioned about that your grandpa that came and told your mother that, you know, maybe he's incarnated, but I was thinking, because I was remember some information from Andrew that, let's see this avatar. We have so many different avatars, right? Experience life. And it's just one unique singularity from everything was emanated for all the 1,000 life or million life experience that we have. That means that, from my point of view, even that the person incarnated that portion of that specific task for this kind of experience, is mean that even that is incarnated, that doesn't mean that the person that is represent your grandfather is incarnated and that everything there is a part. It's like a one branch of the whole thing is experiencing now this autism experience. Mm-hmm. And then it makes me realize we are really not like I'm dying and I incarnated, I'm dying and incarnated. It's like one branch of me is experiencing something in this moment timeline experience, but it's the connection is there from the father that was just in this branch just a few years ago. It can be the branch of the same trunk. That's what I'm trying to figure out, because it's not like having detached. It's just one branch of that trunk that I experience now. The autisms is part of the trunk that was experiencing being your grandfather. I don't know if I can make sense, but it's the vision that I have when you were talking about it. I said, well, it's mean that it's not I'm dying, I reincarnate. It's just another portion of me came to experience something different. That's what the way how I'm trying to figure out that myself.
Mhm.
Because if we are experiencing lifetime, experiencing different moment in time, and at the same moment experiencing different avenues, different experience, then is that mean even it pass, it's still connected. It's the same being, just experiencing one branch of that being, experience something different. That's the way I can see it.
I really like your analogy, Herminia, because when you talk about that, we are experiencing all of our lifetimes now, right? Like time is not linear, so it's not really like the past, it's all happening now. And when you think like the trunk of that tree being that soul that is you, and all those branches and leaves being those incarnations, that's a really beautiful way to look at that and bring it back to like the being that you are in the center of it, which is your soul. I love that.
Thank you. I overlook in the way how I can figure out putting like in a picture way to make sense for myself.
I hear you, Virginia. I hear you.
There's in the book Voyagers too, one of the things that the Guardians talk about are remembering all of those soul shard parts of us, because each one of those incarnated parts was able to assemble part of the 12-strand or 24-strand DNA code, right? Getting those fire letters in the right order. Like that part of us had this experience that allowed us to awaken DNA strand 3 and order that. And this part of me right now, right, is the one pulling all of those parts together and remembering how to do that. Right. So like your analogy of just like sitting at the base of a big tree, being the tree trunk and the leaves and the branches, right? Being the ancestors or the soul shards, or in some cases, both, right? Allowing that memory to filter down through those parts of the DNA code that you inherited from that ancestor and this ancestor and this ancestor, right? And bringing those in to your awareness, your integrated awareness.
Yeah.
And remembering.
Yeah.
I did some work, was working on my nephew one time when he broke his leg. And I was seeing images of him being shot, like during the war. And I couldn't tell if it was World War I or World War II, but I could tell it was like like one of those ball bullets. So maybe it was Civil War. But what came out after we were talking about it was, because it was right where his leg was broken. And what came out when we were talking about it was that his dad's dad was in World War II and was shot in the leg right there. So what I was seeing was the memory in the DNA code of his ancestor and how it was affecting him, because there was genetic weak spot there in his leg where it broke, right? From his ancestor. So I thought, wow, that's really interesting. Sometimes it's hard to tell, like what's past lifetime, what's ancestral. Like when I'm working on someone and I'm seeing images, sometimes it's like, it's whatever is affecting them right now. But it's
Yeah.
hard to say sometimes if it's ancestral or if it's past lifetime. Or maybe it's both. Yeah. So, wonderful.
It's like a wake up. It's like a memory wake up from the ancestors 3 generation back.
Mm.
The clockwork. Oh, tin tin. Remember the pain, something like that. Yes. Oh my goodness, what a mess.
And what a joy. What a
Yeah.
mess and what a joy,
like a-
right? To be
like a-
present here now and
remind me
witnessing.
that remind me the movie for Matters. Ignorance is a bliss. It's a bliss to not know all the craziness that was going around because we are like enjoying the ride and we don't know where we're going. It's so many things that we have to put together that we are in this ride. I said, I don't know when to happen. I'm in the train right now, I'm in the airplane, I'm in the horse, you know, and then in the wagons. You don't know where you are right now. The only thing that we know, we are in the right? Oh my goodness.
Well, like Fozzie Bear says in the Muppet movie, getting there is half the fun. Come share it with me. So glad to be sharing this journey with all y'all.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Any closing words or thoughts or prayers?
Maybe just like
Mhm.
thank them for being with us.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, ancestors,
Thank you.
for supporting us, for sharing your wisdom, for guiding us. And the prayer that I say is, please help support me to release what I need to release, open to what I need to open to, learn what I need to learn, remember what I need to remember, for my greatest good, Gaia's greatest good, and the greatest good of all. I'm grateful
be
to be done.
So be it, so be it. Thank you. Aho.
Aho.
Uh,
Right. Well,
Bye-bye.
thank you all for being here today. I have to drop off. So great to
Thank
see
you.
everyone.
thank you, everyone.
And we'll
I
see you
appreciate our
all.
interconnectedness.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Thank you so
Thanks for
much.
sharing all that you did
Thank you.
today.
Have a great one.
Bye, girls.
Right.
Mm.
See you guys.
See you
Bye-bye.
next week.
Bye-bye.